The crystal chandeliers of the Ashford Estate ballroom cast their amber glow across a sea of rustling silk and starched collars, the air thick with perfume, ambition, and the subtle, animal awareness that marked gatherings where shifters walked among humans. In the shadow of an ornate pillar stood Miss Maya Thornwell, her 40 years settling upon her like an invisible shroud as she watched the dancers spin past in their elaborate quadrilles. "Do you see her?" Lady Seraphina Blackwood's voice floated over the rim of her champagne glass to her companion, loud enough to carry. "Miss Thornwell has graced us with her presence once again. 20 years of failed seasons, and still she haunts the ballrooms. One would think an Omega of her age would embrace solitude with more grace." The words struck Maya with familiar precision, each one a needle she had learned to endure. She lifted her chin, smoothed the dark blue silk of her gown, a color deemed suitable for a woman well past her bloom, and kept her gaze steady on the swirling couples. The fabric whispered against her skin, a quiet reminder of what society had decided she was: respectable, faded, forgotten. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now let's get started. At 40, Maya had become a fixture of pity in the rigidly stratified world that governed both human society and the hidden hierarchy of the shifter packs. She had watched her younger cousins find their mates, had seen Omegas half her age secure powerful bonds and establish their places in pack lineages, while she remained untethered, unclaimed, invisible. The Omega who had missed her season. The Harrington wolf who would never run beside an alpha. Miss Thornwell, came a gentle voice at her shoulder. She turned to find her brother, Thomas, Viscount Harrington and Beta of the Thornwell line. His kind eyes held concern beneath his carefully neutral expression. "You appear weary, sister. Perhaps you would like to retire to the terrace for some air?" "Thank you, Thomas, but I am quite well," Maya replied, her smile a practiced shield she had perfected over 2 decades of disappointing everyone, including herself. But she was not well. She could feel the weight of every pitying glance, every whispered slight, every unspoken judgment that marked her as the family's failure. The Omega past her prime. The woman whose scent had faded, whose time had passed, whose very existence was now an embarrassment to the proud Thornwell name. "Maya," Thomas began, but his words died abruptly. The ballroom fell silent. It was not a gradual hush, but a sudden, electric cessation of sound, as though every conversation, every note of music, every breath had been pulled from the air by an invisible force. Maya felt it before she understood it, a primal awareness that lifted the fine hairs on her arms and sent her wolf stirring restlessly beneath her skin after years of dormant quiet. He had arrived. Lord Varric Ashford, Duke of Thornmere and Alpha of the Northern Pack, stood at the entrance to his own ballroom, and the assembled crowd parted before him like a sea before a predator. He was dressed in charcoal and black, his dark hair pulled back to reveal the sharp, uncompromising lines of his face, and his presence was not that of a man entering a social gathering but of a force of nature descending upon lesser beings. Maya had seen him before, of course. Every shifter in England knew of Varric Ashford, the most powerful alpha in the realm, notorious for his refusal of every suitable match, feared for his cold dismissal of the Pack Council's attempts to secure his line. He was 35 years old, devastatingly wealthy and utterly untouchable. They said he had rejected 17 suitable Omegas in the past decade alone. They said his standards were impossible. They said he would never take a mate. Maya forced herself to look away, to return her attention to the now resumed dancing, to blend back into the shadows where women like her belonged. And then she felt it. A gaze. Intense. Burning. Fixed upon her with the weight of inevitability. Her breath caught. Against every instinct of self-preservation, Maya lifted her eyes across the ballroom, and met the full force of Lord Varric Ashford's stare. His eyes were dark, unfathomable, and locked onto hers with an intensity that made her wolf rise within her, awakening from its long sleep with a keening cry of recognition. For one impossible, suspended moment, the world contracted to the space between them, and Maya could have sworn she saw crimson flash in the depths of his gaze, a primal red that marked the wolf beneath the aristocratic veneer. "Dear God," Thomas whispered beside her, his hand gripping her elbow. "Maya, he's looking at you." But Maya couldn't respond. She couldn't breathe, because Lord Varric Ashford, the most desired, most feared, most impossible alpha in all of England, was moving through the crowd with predatory grace, his eyes never leaving hers, his path direct and unmistakable. He was coming for her, and every person in the ballroom was watching. The hothouse orchids arrived at the Thornwell townhouse precisely at noon, their exotic blooms so rare that even the butler faltered in the doorway, uncertain how to carry the enormous crystal vase without disturbing the cascade of midnight black petals veined with crimson. Maya stared at them from her morning room chair, her tea growing cold in her hands. Black Vanda orchids. From the East Indies. Worth more than most families earned in a year. The card was stark in its simplicity. Your eyes hold more truth than 1,000 empty smiles.
Veta.
Absolutely not. Her sister-in-law, Catherine, appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "Maya, you must return them immediately. Lord Ashford does not court, he conquers. And when he tires of his diversions, he discards them without a second thought. You cannot seriously believe he has genuine interest in a woman of..." She caught herself, but the damage was done. "A woman of my age?" Maya finished quietly. Thomas is beside himself with worry. Varric Ashford's attentions have ruined younger, prettier Omegas. What do you imagine he wants with you? Maya had no answer. She had replayed their dance the previous night 100 times, his hand at her waist, his voice low and deliberate as he asked her questions no one had bothered to ask in years. What did she read? What did she think of the new reforms? Had she noticed the absurdity of Lady Pemberton's matchmaking attempts? He had made her laugh. And when she'd looked up, startled by her own forgotten joy, those dark eyes had flashed red again, just for a heartbeat. The note that arrived that afternoon was even more direct. Hyde Park. The Italian Gardens. 3 o'clock. I would be grateful for your company. Maya went, despite Catherine's protests, despite Thomas's pacing, despite every voice of reason screaming that this was madness. She found him standing beside the fountain, his tall frame silhouetted against the autumn sky, looking utterly out of place among the manicured hedges and chattering society matrons. "Miss Thornwell." He turned as she approached, and the intensity in his gaze stole her breath just as it had the night before. "Thank you for coming. Your note suggested it was hardly a request, Lord Ashford." A ghost of a smile touched his lips.
Perceptive.
"You see things others miss." "I have had 40 years to practice observation, my lord. When one is not occupied with being admired, one learns to watch." "Yes." He moved closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, the barely leashed power that marked him as alpha. "That is precisely why I find myself unable to look away from you. Every other Omega in that ballroom was performing, simpering, calculating, angling for position. But you..." His voice dropped to something almost reverent. "You were simply present.
Still.
Real." Maya's wolf stirred, responding to the unmistakable call in his voice. "I do not understand what you want from me." "Neither do I entirely." His honesty startled her. "Only that when I saw you, something shifted, and I must know why." His eyes flashed crimson in the fading light, and Maya realized with dizzying certainty that this was no game, no cruel diversion. This was fate, waking after 40 years of silence. When Lord Varick Ashford's carriage arrived at the Thornwell townhouse 3 days later, the entire household descended into chaos. Catherine fled to her rooms, claiming a headache. Thomas paced the length of the drawing room like a caged wolf. And Maya sat perfectly still in her chair, hands folded in her lap, while her heart threatened to beat straight through her chest. The butler announced him with a tremor in his voice that spoke volumes about the Alpha's reputation. Varick entered the drawing room as though he owned it, his presence too large, too potent for the delicate furnishings and pale wallpaper. He wore midnight blue today, perfectly tailored, and his dark eyes found Maya immediately, dismissing Thomas's existence entirely. "Miss Thornwell, I hope I am not intruding." "You are," Maya said before she could stop herself. Thomas made a strangled sound behind her. Varick's mouth curved.
Good.
"I prefer honesty to false pleasantries." He turned to Thomas with barely concealed impatience. "Lord Harrington, I wish to speak with your sister privately." "That is highly irregular." "I am aware." The Alpha's tone left no room for negotiation. Thomas departed with visible reluctance, shooting Maya a look that promised a lengthy conversation later. The door closed, and suddenly the drawing room felt impossibly small, the air charged with something electric and dangerous. Maya rose to her feet, needing the dignity of standing. "Why are you here, Lord Ashford? What game are you playing?" "No game." He moved closer, but stopped at a respectful distance. "I am here because I cannot stop thinking about you." "That is absurd." The words burst from her, sharp with desperation. "I am 40 years old. I have no fortune to speak of, no connections of value, no youth, no fertility to offer your bloodline. I am past my season by 2 decades. The Pack Council would never approve such a match, and you know it. I care nothing for the Pack Council's approval. You should. You are the Northern Alpha. Your line requires." "What does my line require, Maya?" He used her given name deliberately, intimately. "A young Omega who sees only my title? Who calculates the worth of my estates while pretending devotion? Who would give me heirs born of strategy rather than truth?" "Yes," she said desperately. "That is precisely what an Alpha requires." "Then I will be the first Alpha to choose differently." He closed the distance between them in 2 strides, and Maya found herself looking up into eyes that held both man and wolf. "I have met 100 suitable Omegas. Pretty, young, perfectly bred. And every single one looked at me and saw power, wealth, position. Do you know what you see when you look at me?" Maya's breath caught. "I see a man who is lonely." The words hung between them, raw and true. Varick's expression shifted, something fierce and vulnerable flashing across his features. "Yes." His voice was rough. "And when I look at you, I see a woman who understands what it means to be invisible despite standing in plain sight. Your eyes, Maya, they hold no artifice, no calculation, only truth. And I have been searching for that truth my entire life." "This is madness," she whispered, even as her wolf rose to meet his, recognizing what her mind refused to accept. "Perhaps." His hand lifted, hovering near her cheek, but not touching. "But it is the only truth I have ever wanted." The bond between them hummed, undeniable and fierce, defying every rule of pack and society alike. The Royal Botanical Gardens at Kew were ablaze with autumn color, but it was the great glass conservatory that drew London's elite on that crisp October afternoon. Maya had agreed to accompany Varick, knowing full well that their public appearance together would ignite a firestorm of gossip. She had not anticipated how thoroughly he would claim her in full view of society. They walked side by side through the humid paradise of exotic palms and orchids, his hand resting possessively at the small of her back, his attention fixed on her alone as she discussed the specimens with genuine enthusiasm. Maya had forgotten what it felt like to speak freely, to have someone listen as though her thoughts mattered. You should have studied botany, Varric said, watching her examine a rare fern with careful fingers. You come alive when you speak of growing things. Women of my station do not study, Lord Ashford. We observe, we embroider, we wait to be chosen. The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. Then it is fortunate, he said quietly, that I have already chosen. Maya's breath caught, but before she could respond, a crystalline voice cut through the verdant air like a blade. Lord Ashford, how unexpected to find you here. Lady Cordelia Ashworth swept toward them in a gown of pristine ivory, her 23 years displayed like weapons in every perfect curve and carefully arranged curl. She was the daughter of an earl, an omega of impeccable breeding, and one of the 17 suitable matches Varric had rejected. Her gaze slid over Maya with barely concealed contempt. And with such unusual company, Varric's hand tightened against Maya's back. Lady Cordelia, I confess myself baffled, my lord. Cordelia's smile was poison wrapped in silk. The entire ton is whispering about your sudden fascination with Miss Thornwell. Some suggest she must have bewitched you. There can be no other explanation for such an extraordinary lapse in judgment. An omega of her advanced years, with no fortune, no connections, no prospects. She laughed, the sound like breaking glass. Surely even you must see the absurdity. Maya felt the words like physical blows, each one confirming every fear she had harbored. She started to step away, to spare herself further humiliation, but Varric's arm became an iron band around her waist, holding her firmly against his side. Lady Cordelia. His voice dropped to a register that made every shifter in the conservatory freeze, their wolves recognizing the Alpha's command. You will listen carefully, as I will say this only once. His eyes blazed crimson, the red glow visible even in the bright afternoon light filtering through the glass above. Miss Thornwell possesses more intelligence, grace, and genuine worth in her smallest finger than you will achieve in your entire calculated existence. She has not bewitched me. She has reminded me what truth looks like in a world drowning in artifice. And I will not tolerate any insult to her character, her age, or her station. She is mine to protect, mine to defend, and should you, or anyone else in this glass house, dare to question my choice again, you will learn exactly why lesser alphas fear my name. The air crackled with power. Cordelia stumbled backward, her face draining of color as the full weight of an alpha's rage pressed against her. Do you understand me? Yes, Lord Ashford, she whispered, then fled. Varric turned to Maya, his eyes still burning red, his hand cupping her face with infinite gentleness. You are mine, he said softly. Let them all see it. And there, in the glass house before all of society, he marked her as his own. The invitation arrived in Varric's own hand, the heavy parchment bearing the Ashford seal in crimson wax. Maya read it 3 times in the privacy of her room, her hands trembling with each pass over the formal script. Thornmere Estate. 3 days. I wish to show you my world, and introduce you to those who matter most to me. If you accept, know that this is not a casual invitation. This is a declaration of intent.
There.
Thomas found her standing at the window an hour later, the letter clutched against her chest. He has invited you to Thornmere, he said quietly. It was not a question. Yes. Maya, if you go, there will be no turning back. An unmated omega traveling to an alpha's ancestral territory, society will consider you as good as betrothed. If he changes his mind, then I will be ruined. She turned to face her brother. But if I do not go, I will spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been. I am tired of being invisible, Thomas. I am tired of being safe. The journey north took 2 days by train and carriage. Maya watched the landscape transform from London smoke and crowds to wild moorland and ancient forests, the territory becoming visibly more primal as they approached the heart of northern Packlands. By the time Thornmere's iron gates came into view, her wolf was pacing restlessly beneath her skin, responding to the raw power saturating the very air. The estate rose from the landscape like something conjured from myth, gray stone and towering spires, surrounded by forests so old they seemed to hold their own consciousness. Varric waited at the entrance, dressed in dark wool and leather, looking more wolf than man against the wild backdrop of his domain. Maya. He handed her down from the carriage himself, his touch sending fire through her veins. Welcome to Thornmere. Welcome home. The words struck her with unexpected force. Home. As though she had always belonged here. He led her into a great hall where a handful of people waited, not the crowd she had feared, but an intimate circle. A tall woman with Varric's dark eyes stepped forward, her smile warm and genuine. Miss Thornwell, I am Sarah, Varric's sister. She took Maya's hands in hers, and Maya felt the assessment of a protective sibling. Then Sarah's expression softened into something like wonder. He speaks of nothing but you. In 35 years, I have never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. I find that difficult to believe, Maya murmured, because you do not yet see yourself as he does. Sarah glanced at her brother, who was watching Maya with unmistakable hunger. He has been half alive for as long as I can remember, going through the motions of duty and title. Then he met you, and suddenly he is present, fully here, awake. An older man approached, his bearing marking him as Beta of the Northern Pack. Miss Thornwell, I am Marcus Thornfield. I have served this pack for 40 years, and I tell you truly, I have never seen our Alpha accept any woman into this hall. You stand where 17 others were denied entry. That alone speaks volumes. Maya felt the weight of their scrutiny, but beneath it lay genuine welcome. These were not courtiers playing political games. These were Varric's pack, his family, and they were embracing her not despite her age or station, but because their Alpha had chosen her. Varric appeared at her side, his hand finding hers with possessive certainty.
Come.
There is something I wish to show you before dinner. As he led her deeper into his domain, Maya realized she was no longer walking into his world as a visitor. She was being welcomed as its future mistress. Varric led her through ancient forest paths as twilight descended, the woods alive with the whisper of wind through leaves and the distant howl of wolves running free under the rising moon. Maya followed, her heart beating in rhythm with the primal pulse of the land itself, until they emerged into a clearing dominated by a massive stone circle, weathered by centuries and humming with pack magic. This is the Heartstone, Varric said, his voice reverent. Every Alpha for the past 800 years has brought their chosen mate here. My father brought my mother, his father before him. It is where we bind ourselves, where we make our vows before the old gods and the pack itself. Maya stared at the ancient stones, feeling their power thrumming through her bones. Why have you brought me here? Because I need you to understand what I am offering you, what I am asking. He turned to face her, and in the fading light his eyes already held that crimson glow. I have carried the weight of this title since I was 19 years old. 16 years of duty, of expectation, of being the Duke, the Alpha, the heir to bloodlines stretching back before England had a name. And in all that time, no one has ever asked me what I need, what I want, what keeps me awake in the darkness. What do you want, Varric? She spoke his name deliberately, intimately, for the first time. I want to be seen, not as the Alpha, not as the title or the power or the bloodline, as a man who is tired of being alone, as a wolf who has searched his entire life for his true mate. He moved closer, his hands rising to frame her face with infinite gentleness. I want a companion who challenges me, who speaks truth even when it is uncomfortable, who looks at me and sees past the crown and the command to the soul beneath. And when I look into your eyes, Maya, I see home." Tears burned in her throat. "I am 40 years old. I cannot give you. You give me everything that matters." His voice was fierce now, commanding. "Your intelligence, your strength, your honesty, your spirit that has survived 2 decades of cruelty and mockery without breaking. That is what I need. That is what an alpha requires in his mate. Not youth, not fertility, but an unbreakable will and a heart that understands sacrifice." Then, with a movement that stole her breath, Lord Varric Ashford, Duke of Thornmere and Alpha of the Northern Pack, dropped to one knee before her. From inside his coat, he withdrew a ring of ancient silver, its band carved with wolves running beneath a full moon, set with a single bloodstone that pulsed with inner fire. "This was my mother's, and her mother's before her. It is the symbol of the Alpha's chosen mate, the mark of the bond." His eyes blazed crimson in the gathering darkness. "Maya Thornwell, I offer you not just marriage, but a mate bond that will bind our souls, our wolves, our destinies for the rest of our lives. I offer you my protection, my devotion, my heart. I offer you a place beside me as my equal, my partner, my Luna. Will you accept?" Maya looked down at the most powerful alpha in England kneeling before her, offering her everything she had believed impossible. All her fears, of age, of inadequacy, of unworthiness, dissolved like smoke in the face of the absolute truth burning in his eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Varric. I accept." The bond snapped into place like lightning, fierce and eternal, as he slipped the ring onto her finger and claimed her as his own. The wedding took place at Thornmere under a winter sky heavy with snow, with witnesses from both the highest ranks of English nobility and the most ancient shifter bloodlines. Maya stood in ivory silk trimmed with silver wolf emblems, facing Varric across an altar of ancient stone, and felt the weight of every skeptical gaze upon her. Lady Seraphina Blackwood attended, her face a mask of barely concealed disbelief. The pack council elders stood in rigid disapproval. Even some of Varric's own relatives whispered behind their hands about the scandal of an alpha binding himself to a 40-year-old Omega with no fortune, no youth, no prestigious lineage. But when Varric took Maya's hands in his and spoke the ancient vows that would bind their souls across lifetimes, his voice rang with such absolute conviction that the whispers died. And when the mate bond sealed, visible to every shifter present as a golden light that flared between them before sinking beneath their skin, even the most ardent critics fell silent. Such bonds could not be manufactured or manipulated. They were fate itself made manifest. "I present to you," Varric said, his crimson eyes blazing with triumph and possession, "the Duchess of Thornmere. My mate, my Luna."
Mean it.
The word echoed through the hall like a declaration of war against anyone who dared question his choice. The months that followed were not without challenge. Society took time to accept what the mate bond had made undeniable. But Maya moved through the world now with the confidence of a woman who had found her place, her purpose, her power. She was no longer the invisible spinster lurking in ballroom shadows. She was the Alpha's chosen, and her quiet strength became legendary. She reformed Thornmere's estate management with the same keen observation she had once applied to surviving society's cruelty. She established schools for the pack's children. She sat beside Varric in council meetings, her insights proving invaluable, her presence transforming him from a feared ruler into a respected leader. And then, 2 years after their wedding, on a spring morning bright with promise, Maya gave birth. The physicians had declared it impossible. The pack council had whispered that her age would prevent conception. But fate, it seemed, delighted in defying expectations. The child was a son, strong, healthy, with his father's dark hair and his mother's intelligent eyes. And when he opened those eyes for the first time, They flashed brilliant crimson, marking him as an alpha of unprecedented power. Varric held his son with shaking hands, then looked at Maya with such profound love that it stole her breath even now. "You have given me everything," he said hoarsely. "Everything I never dared to hope for." Maya touched his face. This powerful alpha who had seen her when she was invisible, who had chosen her when she was dismissed, who had loved her when she believed herself unlovable. "We gave each other everything that matters." The christening was attended by everyone who had once mocked her, pitted her, dismissed her as past her season, and unworthy of notice. Lady Seraphina Blackwood came, her expression carefully neutral. The Pack Council elders arrived in formal delegation, their earlier disapproval transformed into grudging respect. And Maya stood beside her mate, holding their son, and felt the profound satisfaction of a woman who had defied every expectation and proven that true connection knew no boundaries of age or convention. She was 42 years old. She was the Duchess of Thornmere. She was the Alpha's beloved mate and the mother of the next Northern Alpha. She was, at last, exactly where she belonged. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and drop a comment. Your support means everything.